What's up, guys? Jack and Anthony back at On the Mission again. Today we're going to go over kind of just a general overview of the 9mm options in the market. We have some of the more popular or known firearms in front of us.
And then we got quite a few budget-friendly options as well. Everybody's got a budget that they got to work with, and there's pretty much a solid option, even down on the cheaper end of the spectrum, all the way up to your high-end Gucci guns on the end of the spectrum. So it's just kind of big thing is doing your research and figuring out what works for you and what it is that what the gun is, what the biggest purpose of the gun is. If you're looking for something that's small as a concealed carry gun, if you're looking for something that's kind of bigger like this for a duty or competition gun, or if you're just looking for something that's going to be a little fun range toy that you can just take out and just literally have fun and be silly at the range with. There are plenty of guns out there, and it just all depends on what your budget is and what you're looking for.
Just a side note, everything has been safety checked. I know all you safety freaks out there. We're just going to get that out of the way. I know everybody gives the quote-unquote yeet cannon.
Everybody gives the high point a lot of crap.
Yeah.
A lot of crap.
So basically, these are known to be bricks. But here at the gun shop, we don't really care what you get as long as it's something that you can use as a tool, basically. Doesn't matter your budget. So starting at the lowest, we went kind of higher. Now we're gonna go a little bit lower. These are about the 180 price point. They're not gonna be known to be the prettiest or the best thing, but when you're in a fight, it's better to have a stick and not just dirt thrown at somebody. So
high points are also, as much as they have become a meme and as much as people mock on them, it is heavy enough that you could throw it at them if the gun stops working. That is the big joke, but in all honesty, they are relatively reliable for what they are. I mean, it is a $180 firearm. You got to be very mindful of that. It is definitely on the cheaper end of the spectrum, but you get what you pay for. For the most part, it works, but like I said, you're only paying $200 for it. Yeah. So you're not really expecting the world out of it. You know what I mean?
Right. So if you're gonna trust your life with that, cool.
But everybody's got a budget, and if this is what the only thing that you can afford, by all means, like you said, having a stick in a fight is a lot better than just having your hands. It's a tool, and it is something to kind of give you that edge or kind of even out the playing field if you are somebody that's in a position where you can't really just normally defend yourself. It'll do that job. Another great option for kind of the budget-friendly conscious is going to be Taurus. Another one that has been pretty brutally mocked, I would say, relentlessly over the years.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Spent quite a bit of time working at a gun range. Saw my fair share of Tauruses with issues. I will say this. A large portion of the issues I saw with Tauruses, a lot of the time, I'm not going to say they're the most quality gun in the world, but a lot of them were user error or user neglect of the firearm. A lot of the times that's really the issue. They're not terrible. It's not something that I am a big fan of shooting, but they shoot. They're relatively reliable, and for, again, the price point of about $200 to $300, it's kind of hard to beat that. You have things like, I would say, I guess a PSA dagger that would probably be in that same price point, but you really kind of struggle to kind of do better than that in that $200 to $300. Taurus is relatively reliable. The parts are out there for pretty much everything. Almost everybody makes a magazine for Taurus, not a magazine, a holster. Sorry. It's not impossible, and they do.
We do.
We do. But and then you do still get your rails to add things that are lights. Obviously, this Taurus itself is not optic ready, but they do offer them optic ready. And I've even seen some of them with threaded barrels, so they do have the higher end ones to have all the kind of bells and whistles without having to be a break the bank package per se or price point.
And some stuff to just remember too. You're paying for what you get. So this is like the 280 price point. After a while, in and out of a holster, the finish is going to come off. The barrels, after so many rounds, will probably start to have some issues, but the average person is not going to shoot enough for that to ever happen in its lifetime, so don't worry about that. But even for this price point, like he was saying, optic ready, threaded barrels, extended mags, this one even has thumb safety. It's good stuff to think about if it's your first firearm. We wouldn't recommend a Taurus as your first one, but if that's your budget, then that's fine with us. So,
like I said, if it's I will never shy away from selling somebody a gun that they want. I definitely would say, hey, if that's what's your budget, that's what your budget. We'll get you the gun. But always kind of encouraging you to look at other options that are in your price range. Like I said, not the Taurus is a bad gun. It's definitely not something that I would say is like my favorite. And I'm not a big fan of shooting them. They're not really, they don't really shoot nice in my hands, in my opinion. But they're a reliable gun. And plenty of people across the country and across the globe carry Taurus. They work. You know, they wouldn't sell as many of them as they did if they didn't. But they definitely are the lower end of that price range. And I think if you're kind of looking for something to defend yourself or to trust your life to, it might be worth just going even a little bit higher on that $200 to $300 price range to something even in that, I'd say $300 to $400 if you can. In $300 to $400, you get really nice things like the Ruger Max 9 here. As you can see with the close-up, really, really nice textured grip. Nice. This one also has a manual thumb safety as well, which is really, really nice. Optics ready, fiber optic front sight. There's really not a whole lot you could ask for more out of a 350 actually. $350 gun. They come with what?
Steel mags.
Steel mags, and these are 10 rounds, and I think they make
12.
up to 12. Especially for like a small, really concealable, I would say like in that SIG 365 and like Glock 43X, like that real compact area of guns. It's a really great option, and a lot of people just don't really know about it because Ruger, although Ruger's kind of a big name for things like the 1022, now they've made a big push in ARs over the last few years, and then I would say their bolt guns. A lot of people really kind of sleep on their handguns and really don't really acknowledge them or just forget that they exist, and Ruger makes some pretty solid options. I would say next up probably in the price range is going to be, so we just did about $300 to $400. Another great option, although this Canik is a little bit more. Another really, really great option in the $300 to $400 range is going to be Caniks. Caniks are great guns that, especially for a first-time shooter, that is more towards something that I would push somebody that's like in that $300 to $400 budget of being like, hey, dude, if you, or him, because whoever, but being like, hey, if you've got that money, it just may be worth it to save that extra, $50 to $100 and put it into a Canik. Like I said, this one's a little bit more dressed up out of the box with the magwell and all the other bells and whistles, but even your standard Caniks that come in around $300 or $400 are pretty dressed up. You get usually, I want to say, 18-round mags with the full-size guns. They're coming in with better than Glock out of the box triggers. They are, even on their cheaper models. The ergonomics are a little bit easier for most people to get around. Most people really like the grip angle. They come with a nice grip texture, typically multiple back straps. A holster, a nice little case, kind of all the tools. They come optics ready. It's really kind of hard to beat the package that Canik has been putting together with their guns over the past few years. I don't really know of anybody else in that, even that $300 to $400 range that has everything that Canik's going to give you.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Like I said, this one is a little bit more dressed up, and this is a little bit of their higher end one, but even for being a high-end gun with all the bells and whistles, this one's only coming in at about like $580, which realistically for a gun that's optics ready, threaded barrel, magwell, all the enhanced features, it's a pretty solid deal. Plus everything else that they give you, additional mags, additional back straps, everything else. Really great option.
I think just building off from there, like he was saying, normally they're about $300 to $450. That was a little bit more pricey. Is your tried and true Glocks. This is always one that we do recommend as your first one. If anybody comes in, they're like, what would you trust your life with? What do you feel that I should get as my first one? And I know you guys out there that hate Glocks are going to yell at us, but we kind of always gravitate towards the Glocks. They're in that middle price point, not too expensive, not too cheap. And everybody uses them. Military, law enforcement, private security, like everybody. And everybody that has to carry a tool like this with them will trust their life to a Glock. And the finishes are good, the polymers are good. Somebody's beeping over there. Don't know what's going on, but that's Detroit for you. So you guys see Gucci Glocks. You do everything you can possibly imagine. You can take a $500 firearm and make it $3,000, and then that just takes triggers, lights, you kind of name it. Man, something's going crazy out there. Whatever.
The cool thing with Glocks is you can really dress them up and do anything and everything you want to them. Another great option, really in the same. Actually, they've been coming out cheaper lately than Glocks, as far as from what I've been seeing online. CZ P10Cs. The P10C basically is, I would say, unfortunately, we don't have one. We don't have here to, of course, give you a
we
reference.
both actually are fans. Of
but I have, I will say this: they are coming from a guy who's a big Glock fan, which I know plenty of people out there are not. And hey, to each your own; it's your preference. I really do like the CZs. I will say this: what you may save in a CZ up front, you may end up paying for additionally in the magazine cost. Oh. There are other things to consider too, besides upfront costs when you're purchasing a gun. Case in point, I was a big Glock guy, had just a bunch of Glocks, and then I bought not a P365, but I bought a P320, and that was my first steel frame handgun. I almost cried when I realized that, not everybody makes handgun magazines for $25 like Glock does, and that, I was going to be paying $50 or more per magazine. CZ magazines aren't that expensive, but it is something that is, like I said, it's another thing to consider. Sometimes you may have, the Glock would probably, I would say, come in, typically, especially lately, probably about another $100 or so more, even like a Gen 3, a brand new one, than like a CZ P10F. However, like I said, there are other things to consider, mag compatibility and magazines themselves. These Glock mags are everywhere and anywhere, and you can get them cheap. And like I said, I can't think of a single gun shop that you could walk into in the United States that wouldn't have Glock mags. They may not have exactly your model that you're looking for in stock, but at least not carry Glock mags.
Yeah, and everybody makes them. P mags.
CZ magazines, I will say, are typically a lot.
Makes them.
Yeah, they're a lot more difficult to come across. One thing that we have been seeing a lot more lately, obviously with the explosion of the P365, is thankfully a lot of gun stores are now carrying the SIG macro mags, at least, which they were
like $60.
Again, yeah, it is another thing that you got to consider. When you go from a gun that has polymer magazines with a metal insert to a full steel metal magazine, it is an additional cost that you, the purchaser, are going to be facing, unfortunately. But
so that brings us to our next kind of segue. Since we're talking about the 365, that is also another great option if you're looking at a more compact, trustworthy firearm. We chose the macro to talk about because everybody knows the 365. That kind of changed the game when they first came out with a micro carry with 10 rounds, 10 to 12, depending on the magazine size. Yep. But then now with this is just kind of taken over a small, compact frame. Technically, it's smaller than a Glock 19, but you're holding 17 rounds. And then this guy even comes with a nice,
the ports up front
and a shorter barrel and stuff, and give you night sights and
less felt
everything
recoil,
off the bat. Yeah, this thing, I had Glocks. I always sold everything, got all 365s. Sorry, Glock guys. But SIG is kind of where I'm at now. And it's just kind of customizable. Like this, again, just like Glocks, opens the door to you can customize the frame, a trigger, grip modules. You can get extended mags. That's
the really big thing with the 365 is the fact that, and there are more companies that are going towards that style now. But the biggest thing,
or is it?
No, Springfield, and then I think you're going to see a lot of major manufacturers kind of push towards that. But having that option with the whole the FCU and the whole grip module thing, it really gives you a whole world of optimization and customization for you, the shooter. The biggest things that I always tell people, like if they're coming into the shop and they are looking at a handgun versus like for their first handgun, never really shot one before, don't really know what they're looking for. The biggest thing I can always tell people is like with long guns, you can take a long gun, whether it be a rifle or shotgun, and pretty much fit it to any person out there. There really wasn't that option for handguns before like the whole grip module kind of thing and like the adjustable back straps. It was kind of, a Glock, for example. This is, your Glock frame is what is your firearm. You can only go so far with changing that before you really are, and it's irreversible, anything that you do to it, whether you stipple it or do whatever to make it more customizable to you, that's great. But in the event that, say, you need to go sell that firearm, that does not always equal more value. Sometimes that could equal less value. The cool thing, though, with the 365s or the 320s or really anything that has that sort of fire control unit is that even if you don't like any of the grips that SIG happens to make for it, there are, I know Polymer 80 makes them, Wilson Combat makes them, Sharps Brothers makes it. There's a million and one companies. Icarus makes them. There's a million and one companies out there that make the different grip modules for them, so you really can find something that more fits just to you without actually having to modify the firearm itself, which is really nice.
And if you guys that don't quite know what we're talking about, when he says FCU, that's the fire control unit. So on the 365s, this is actually not your gun. There's a little trigger unit that drops into this frame that is actually your firearm, and that's what's serialized. When you're talking about an old school kind of style like the Glocks, this whole entire bottom part, trigger and frame, is considered the firearm. So that's what you are actually registering in the states that require registrations, all that kind of stuff. But a fire control unit, you can really drop this trigger unit into any frame, slide, combination you want. That's why we feel like this is the most customizable one at the moment, but still everybody customizes that. But that's what fire control unit means. It's FCU, fire control unit, for those guys that don't know what that means.
The Glock is always going to have, hands down, the most aftermarket accessories available for it. It's just the nature of it. I think for probably almost 10 years, the Glock 19, whether in the Gen 3 variety or the Gen 4 variety, was the most popular sold just handgun. I don't even think it was like,
I think the world.
I think in the world, and it wasn't necessarily just in that concealed category, because again, anything realistically in this range as far as size makes a great concealed carry firearm, but also a great, you want it as a outside the waistband duty gun, like cool, Glock 19 can absolutely work for it. I know plenty of police departments that field their officers with 19s, plenty of federal law enforcement as well that field their agents with 19s instead of full-size 17s or 47s. So it's a really, really great option, but yeah, they get Gucci'd out, unfortunately, just with parts, not necessarily the gun itself. That you can really there's, as much as these may be like the Legos of handguns, like we always refer to the AR as the Lego of rifles. Glocks used to be the Lego of handguns, but really now it's kind of the 365s, the 320s, or anything that have that fire control unit that you can kind of just plug and play and swap out.
Because if you wanted to swap this frame out, you basically have to run a background check and get it transferred from FFL to FFL.
Yep.
While this, you can go right on to Bass Pro, Optics Planet, Brownells and stuff, and just buy this, and they ship it to you whatever speed you want, basically, because it's not the gun, and the fire control unit is actually the gun itself.
Say you don't like the typical black plastic or black polymer that comes on most firearms. There are a lot of people that are perfectly fine with their guns just being plain Jane, but there are also a lot of people that like to have a little bit of color and creativity to their life. We understand that here with our very colorful options for holsters.
One behind him.
Yeah, one behind me. But that's the other cool thing with the 365s too, is that there are even just a bunch of different options for grip modules if you just don't like the color, let alone the grip or the shape of anything. If you don't like the color, cool, you can change that out. As much as I am a Glock guy, it pains me to say it's not as easy to do that with a Glock. It just isn't.
You can rattle can it.
Yeah, rattle can. That's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But thanks, guys, for joining us again. If you guys are interested in any of these firearms, come see us here at the Westland or Highland location, or even hop onto our website. And then right now we're running a special. Any handgun purchase, you get 20% off any of our holsters that are custom fitted to your specific firearm.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. See you in the next one.
Have a great one.